So the partnership that we have had in place with the Archdiocese, we started by looking at all 46 counties here in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, gathering all of the data and demographic information that we possibly could for parishes and schools, and then ultimately developing some conclusions and recommendations out of that. From that foundation, we first started by saying, where are there opportunities for new schools? Are our schools located in the right places? Do our existing schools have opportunities for continued growth and or expansion? So we didn't want to look at it in just silos. We wanted to take all of that data and again, use it to make a sound decision to say, these are the appropriate next steps. So it's an exciting time here in the Archdiocese. I'm going to share a little bit more so just from some of the shifts and changes that we're seeing around the country, and then break that down and talk a little bit more about how this impacts you here in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. So in terms of looking at the conversation that we're having here today, it's really a story of growth and new life. And what that means is, from a national perspective, our Catholic schools saw an increase in enrollment for the first time in 2 decades. One reason for that, and we have a little bit of research to show for it, but the COVID impact led parents to have more of an openness to exploring educational options other than the places where their students were currently enrolled. So our Catholic schools saw a huge uptick in that. 85% of our Catholic schools around the country were open for in-person learning within the first 2 months that they had shut down. Many of the public schools, it took them at least a year, some almost a year and a half, before they brought students back in person. We also saw about a 75 to 80% retention of our public school families who shifted to Catholic schools during COVID. We always hear it, but we don't always have data to back it up. Our Catholic school leaders and teachers tell us we just need to get them in the door. Once we get them in the door, we can keep them, they stay. Well, that was our open window and opportunity, and we took advantage of that. So we want to talk about how we can continue to do so. New life in the existing Catholic schools that are expanding, new school Catholic schools that are opening across the country each year. So I'll give you a little bit of national data on that. All too often, we hear the story of schools closing, right? And those are the news articles that seem to be posted online and shared with all of us, is unfortunately, the downside of what some of our Catholic schools have faced. The contrast to that is that in those same areas and regions where we may be seeing Catholic schools close, we're also seeing new schools open. As a company, even at Meitler, number one, we are conducting more new school and expansion studies than we ever have in over 50 years. That's an exciting opportunity. But similarly, we're working in certain parts of the country where in one location, we're conducting a growth and vitality study because the shifts and the changes in the demographics are showing a decrease in enrollment. And 1 hour away, we're conducting a new school study where population is growing and expanding. So this is why it's so important to really look at all of that information as a whole and say, what do we do about it? So this table that I have up here, the Catholic schools by region, the number of schools has dropped in all 6 regions of the country from 2018 to 2023. But there were also new Catholic schools that opened in 5 of those 6 regions, with a total of 20 new schools overall for the year. So where are these new schools opening and why? There's a few different factors that are part of the decision making when we look at opening up new schools. One of them, as I mentioned, is shifting demographics. I'm going to share with you a little bit of the 2020 census data, but I say this kind of say it lightly in the fact that in many parts of the country, that 2020 census data is also already old. 1, it took 3 years to get it. 2, there have been so many shifts and changes since 2020 that there's an additional level of research and analysis that has to go into looking at where are families moving to, why are they moving there, and again, how does that impact our Catholic schools? State funding is another. You're experiencing it here in Oklahoma City, right? So the expansion and or creation of school choice around the country, tax credit scholarship programs, those are making a massive impact in enrollment in our Catholic schools. We're working in the state of Florida, who is in a position that no other state right now is currently in. They can open 4 brand new schools tomorrow because they are just booming and growing and at capacity or over capacity. When we provide financial opportunities to families interested in our Catholic schools, they jump on it. Okay? There's lots of other pieces that go along with that, though, in making sure that we maintain who we are as our Catholic schools. But looking at it from an enrollment perspective, it's, again, an opportunity. Increased willingness to explore other options is something that I just mentioned before. One of the things that COVID allowed for or shifted in parents was maybe I do need to look for something else. Whether it was their students were currently in the public school, being homeschooled, varying factors for parents who decided it was time to start pursuing other options. So what does this mean for the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City? As mentioned, the data and demographic analysis is what we've used as our foundation and starting point. And again, being able to identify what our current realities are and being able to put some goals and action steps in place. The main questions that needed to be asked in this first round of the data and demographic study was, number one, can we expand seats? So we looked at all of the schools, looked at all of their trends in enrollment, and first we want to be able to say, number one, are those schools at capacity? There's nothing better for a Catholic school than a waiting list. I will also tell you that. There's something about it that leads people to say, wait, my kid can't get in. I can't just enroll and I'm guaranteed. It makes parents, it's a perception, right? Perception of what's being offered, what's being available. Reopening schools that have closed. This is happening more and more around the country as well. Unfortunately, in the past, the rule was no kids, no money, no mission. And those were the first schools to close. They weren't always the right schools to close, though. We didn't look at the demographics. We didn't look at the data, the shifts to say, is this the reality and what we're going to face over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Or could it change in the future? Are there opportunities to build new schools or open new schools? Okay, so this first round gave us a little bit of a sense, too, in saying, where is their interest in potentially new school offerings? And most importantly, also, how would that impact our existing Catholic schools? A main component of any new school study for us at Meitler is that we are not going to recommend opening a new school if it's only going to close or negatively impact one that already exists. Our mission is to make sure that the future of Catholic schools, the future of the Catholic Church, is growing and expanding and evangelizing in a way that we've never been able to do before. Just by opening new schools is not going to answer and solve all of those problems. General growth in the area, I'll talk a little bit about what you're seeing. Again, as I mentioned, we looked at all 46 counties and also broke them down to the local level. Archdiocesan investment and planning for the future. This one's huge. I can't express this enough. The commitment to Catholic schools in this archdiocese goes without saying. It's prevalent in all of the work that we've done, in all of the meetings that we've conducted, groups that we've met with. It's very easy to have opportunities for growth and expansion when you have people who believe in the mission. So certainly opportunities is that last spot. I'm going to go through these slides rather quickly. I'm happy to share them with you afterwards. You're going to see a lot of information, a lot of data, and it may be a little overwhelming. So take it with a grain of salt to start. But in terms of looking at the demographic sources, two of them that are listed on here, Claritas and Mission Insight, those are two software companies that we use as a company at Meitler. Claritas gives us general census population information. So projected in city population projections. We also break it down by school-age children. We break it down by race, ethnicity, and we look at median family household income. Mission Insight gives us more of a Catholic lens. It breaks down population by religion, breaks down by makeup of household, families, careers for parents, those sorts of things. And then, as I mentioned, we can't just rely on census data. So we dug a little bit deeper into the Research and Economic Analysis Division, Oklahoma State Department of Health, and Department of Ed. This was our geographic reach for the 46 counties that are made up in the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City. So here's each of the deaneries separated out. What the demographics show is that the population in the state of Oklahoma is projected to gradually increase through the year 2070. We also then decided to look at Oklahoma City Metro as kind of a separate subgroup of the entire state of Oklahoma. And that will really be the driver of future growth. From 2020 to 2070, the state of Oklahoma, while seeing a 44% increase, similarly, just in the Oklahoma City metro area, is also projecting the same amount of growth. Don't be overwhelmed. There's highlighted lines for a reason. There's a lot there. These are all your counties, but In addition to the growth, what we wanted to highlight are specifically those that are maybe seeing more of a significant growth. Because again, if we're going to look at the archdiocese as a whole, then we need to be able to take different groupings and pockets and say, again, where are our greatest opportunities? So the highlighted counties are where you're seeing the most growth. I will tell you, it's not huge though. If there's one thing I've learned about the state of Oklahoma, it's how spread out it is. Also Oklahoma City. And this data represents that. You're not just seeing rubber stamps on counties or cities in this area where you're saying, we need to look there. This took a lot of digging and a lot of extra analysis to really pinpoint which areas we should look at. Birth rates, however, have decreased since 2010. This is not unique to just you here. This is a worldwide. Ironically, just yesterday, I read a research article that was talking about the impact of the natural decline of births around the world. Not just our country, not just our state, not just this area. So we have to be mindful of that. Each of these next 4 tables, if you'll notice in the title, it's just broken down by age group. So this is where we look at, again, long-term sustainability for our schools and or long-term viability for the possibility of opening new schools. The 0 to 4 age group, as mentioned with the birth rates, we are still, however, seeing certain areas where percentages are deemed to see a slight amount of growth. I also want to caution you, though, in some places where we see, for example, Noble County, 2.2% growth, the number right next to that, though, is 16. That's 16 kids, right? So we want to be mindful of what our metrics are showing. Data gives us one number. We need to be able to dig in deeper. Here's where the story starts to shift a little bit. The 5 to 9 age group, again, this is a trend across the country. Our last recession in 2008, 2009 led to fewer births. So we experienced a decline in births in around that time frame. Now we're starting to see those ages filtering through our school system. Again, how does that impact us? Well, I'm going to show you in a minute. Look at this one. How many yellow lines do you see? So how are our schools planning for a potential decrease in middle school enrollment? You may already be feeling it. You may already be experiencing it. Did you know it was coming? Okay, so that's where a lot of these data points, what does this mean next? Those kids are moving into high school. Have our high schools looked at the data and demographics to say, we may need to look at, it's what we call right sizing. It's not always about growing in enrollment or decreasing in enrollment, but what shifts and changes do you have to make in your school to accommodate for the realities that are in front of you? Adversely, for current high school age, that population is booming. So this bodes a challenge. We're seeing the greatest increases in high school enrollment currently and over the next 5 years, but we know a decrease is coming. That's why this is so important. We cannot plan for growth and growth and growth and not know if we're going to get hit or impacted negatively in the next 5 years. We broke it down by race, ethnicity. So we look at percentages of each of those groups as a percentage of total population. The story ultimately shows that there is an increase in diversity, especially in the Hispanic and all other populations. I think this is a trend that everyone is noticing, aware of. So again, it's a matter of being able to step back and say, what do we do about it? How are we going to make sure that we are making sure our schools are meeting the needs of the families that live in our areas? I also mentioned that we look at median family household income. We use median family household income as a perception of affordability for families when they look at posted tuition amounts online. Through the research that we've conducted over 50 years, our metrics have found families that live in lower socioeconomic areas are willing and able to devote approximately 4 to 6% of their median family household income to tuition for one child. Families that are in more middle class areas, that percentage increases to about 8 to 10%. And families that come from a higher socioeconomic area are willing and able to devote approximately 12 to 14%. What we have found is that posted tuition rates that start to push closer to 15% of median family household income, parents deem it unaffordable. They won't even consider it. It becomes a sticker shock number to them. We do not recommend using this percentage rate for selecting a tuition amount, rather to know and understand how much tuition assistance should you be prepared to provide to families at your school based on the realities of the socioeconomics that they live in. We also decided to look at Oklahoma public schools and see what enrollment trends were looking like there, because it's very important to look at it on a larger scale to say what's happening in the Catholic schools. If Catholic school enrollment is declining but public school enrollment is increasing, that's one story. If both are declining, that's another, but if they look pretty similar, then we need to be able to identify that. What you're seeing here kind of goes to show a little bit of what I mentioned before. Look at the year that public school enrollment decreased the most, 2020 to 2021. Granted, not all those families stayed, right? They're starting to go back to their public schools, but again, it's an opportunity. The 10 largest public school districts in the state of Oklahoma, 6 of them are in your archdiocese. Okay? So again, the story here is, what is our value proposition? Why should families choose our Catholic schools over the public schools that may actually be ranked some of the best in the state? I know I left you with a cliffhanger, right? There's more. There's always more. But I want to be mindful, certainly, of your time, though, too. There's a lot here, and that's the important part. It was to give you kind of, again, a little bit of the, what does all this look like? What does it mean? But it's also a piece to be able to do exactly this. Make sure that it's fresh in your minds as you think about the future of Catholic schools in this archdiocese. There are so many opportunities for you here. Lots of growth, lots of changes. So the purpose of this was to show you a little bit of the realities, a little bit of the numbers that are here, in hopes that you'll leave here today starting to ask some of those tough questions. Are we doing what's best for our Catholic schools in the archdiocese? Could we be doing more? Okay. Yes?
So it feels like there's a lot of migration from around the United States to Oklahoma.
Yeah.
How does that affect any of your numbers here?
So we look at both net migration and in-migration. So that's where birth rates come into play, but then the overall projections also take into effect families that are moving. As part of all of our studies in that, we also meet with city, county planners, demographers, to get a better sense also of housing, developments, what kind of families are moving in, ages of children, all of those sorts of things. So it's certainly factored in as well.
Angela,
yeah.
Could you just speak to some of the areas of the diocese that you saw the greatest interest in future schools?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we pulled, and I pulled those slides out for the sake of time, but there were about 6 identified areas, some that were identified by the archdiocese to say we think that there might be some opportunity here, and others through our data analysis and research, we actually even proposed some new places, some new cities in the archdiocese that considered doing a deeper dive into the option or opportunity for a new school. The first one we started with, where we got the greatest positive response, is St. Monica in Edmond. So we followed that up with a second round of conducting a new school study, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with parishioners, and then doing a second survey. So as part of, thank you for bringing that up, as part of this first round too, we conducted an archdiocesan-wide survey. Hopefully you all saw that, but really just, again, getting some more individualized responses on, are people interested in the schools? What are they looking for in schools? Where would they send their child if they had a school closer to home? Those sorts of things. So St. Monica came out with the largest number of responses, but also the most favorable. The next new school study that we're moving into is at St. Teresa of Avila in Hera. So that one also came back as positive. Some of the other cities and locations, Mustang, Lawton, I'm trying to remember from memory now, Norman. So yeah, we have a few, and we tested also, is it elementary, is it high school, is it PK-12? So we're going into this with kind of all options on the table. But again, we need the data and information to be able to make a sound decision to say, is this something that we should consider moving forward? It's not a quick decision, right? It's very timely, and it takes a lot of stakeholder input and engagement. And so that's where we're at in the process currently.
How does the introduction of a virtual option like St. Isidore affect your recommendations?
So we included that in our survey, and we also tested it on the survey. So we know we have to keep in mind the realities of, again, kind of enrollment and new school options and what's already existing, but also what are other plans that are in place that haven't started yet. So we tested it. The data is fascinating. I said it kind of jokingly in a meeting last night, but parents want the school that's the best fit for their child. They will send 5 kids to 5 different schools. And that's not how it used to be, right? It used to be we had a parish, we had a school, and our parishioners from that parish enrolled in that school. I will argue that every school in the country today is a regional Catholic school. The way that they were created, developed, and founded no longer exists. So we tested it. Outright, it was not something that parents were flocking to, but we were able to at least use it and keep it anecdotally to say, are parents going to choose it?
What impact can you see that state funding has, the impact it's had on other Catholic schools across the country where they've injected state funding in the last 10 years?
Significant impact. Enrollments are through the roof. The number one caution in that is something I mentioned before. It's maintaining our mission and our values. Where I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, we have schools that are 100% non-Catholic. We have 3 state choice programs for families to be able to enroll their children. So it's making a huge impact on enrollments. But again, we have to be mindful about how we go through the admissions process and things like that.
Thank you for your presentation. This is a weird question, but not only do you have an opportunity to do a school, but then you actually have to run a school. And one of the challenges Oklahoma seems to perennially have at the macro level is finding teachers to outfit them. So does Meitler look at that kind of data, and how does that factor into your analysis?
Absolutely. So it is one of the primary components. First, that what we're studying is enrollment potential and community interest. So that phase of it is just, is this even a realistic thing that we should consider? If enrollment potential comes back as viable now, but also sustainable long term, the next phase of planning is exactly what you just identified. So it's one, looking at facilities. It's looking at how much is this going to cost us. And part of that is we need to develop the governance model. We need to develop the curriculum. We need to map out and plan out what grades are we going to open with, how many sections, how many teachers do we need, how much do we plan to pay those teachers, what is tuition going to be. So in the next phase of planning, we actually work with each parish to conduct a financial analysis, and we do projections. So we have to factor in not even just can we find teachers, but are we going to pay them an adequate rate to be able to keep them? So yes, it is part of it.
So your population projections for ages 4 to 8, 10 to 12, 14 to 18, I take it that was your population. Was Mission Insight able to help you understand how the Catholic population in those age brackets is changing, and how does it differ from the general population?
Yeah, so we didn't pull that specifically for this. It's another layer that we absolutely could dive into, and I've had a few questions even just in kind of walking around today where there's a great interest in that. So yes, also making sure too that population's one thing, right? I will tell you though, even just from the most recent St. Monica survey that we sent out, all but 9 respondents were Catholic. So that I've never seen a number that high, I will tell you that. So there's definitely, again, certain areas within smaller communities that we're working in that we're gathering and capturing more of that data, more of the Catholic, non-Catholic, but we did not do that for the entire archdiocese yet. Yes.
In looking at your surveys, have you been primarily focused on K through 8, or is there an appetite for additional Catholic high schools primarily in the Oklahoma City metro area?
Sure, so we tested pre-K through 12, and we broke it down pre-K through 8, we broke it down 9 through 12, and then we tested, are they looking for like a one campus model of pre-K through 12? So yes, we tested all 3.
So you've got a lot of statistics there. What kind of statistics do you have showing the impact of Catholic education on continuing to practice your faith as an adult?
Yep, so some of the questions that we ask in the survey and part of our interviews and listening sessions are being able to understand people's commitment to the mission of Catholic schools. So for all respondents, whether they have children or not, we ask questions like, a Catholic school is an important ministry of the parish. A Catholic school is an important ministry in helping a family develop their child's faith formation. We've even asked very specifically, we've conducted one I'm actually conducting right now in Bridgeport, Connecticut. The bishop said, it has to be expected that the parents will uphold the expectations of being a Catholic, and so they almost have to commit to doing that in order to commit to attending the school. So we are able to gather that data to say, okay, are they just sending their child to a Catholic school because it's not what they currently have, or is it because there is a firm commitment to the mission of the Catholic Church?
Is there any silver bullet for advice from other dioceses, other states, that would assure that we would encourage successfully the lowest end of the socioeconomic status of youngsters have access to this program?
Absolutely. So that is another area that we've really started to identify and work a lot on in our research. The funding models of many of our Catholic schools is broken. I'm just going to say that. Again, when we think about how our Catholic schools were created and founded, it was through our parishes, right? And what parishes deem or archdioceses deem a parish subsidy. We call it an investment, but most often it's listed as a subsidy. That subsidy or that investment is under the assumption that parents are tithing, right? And they're giving to the church. Well, we've seen the data and the statistics that show that families in our pews has decreased, which has also negatively impacted the amount of money that our parishes are able to invest in our Catholic schools. There are definitely, it's a situation by situation case, but specifically for you here, again, how you utilize the tax credit scholarship program and the way that parishes are investing in our Catholic schools, our recommendation is that our parishes should not be funding a deficit. They should be supporting and providing exactly what you're talking about. Families that desire a high quality Catholic education that cannot afford it. So it's a change in thinking. It's a change in processes and how we fund our Catholic schools, but it's an extremely important one, especially as we look at the demographics.
I don't know if this has any application, but I've heard about another form of education outside the Catholic Church, the academy, classical education. So do you look at curriculum and why that particular group is drawing a lot of young people that are Christian but not Catholic?
I actually met with the headmaster and toured the school. Yes. And Catholics. Lots of Catholics that are choosing that style of education. So that is also a piece that led to what kinds of questions do we need to be asking of the Catholic families in our archdiocese to find out why are they choosing that school over our Catholic schools that currently exist, but also if a new Catholic school were to open somewhere, would they enroll and why?
Can you give a little bit of the results of the data that we have? For instance, her question on that preference for K-12, K-8, and kind of maybe some of the surprising data that came out of Oklahoma City.
Sure. Yeah. Overwhelmingly, there's a great interest in PK-12th. What we're finding in some of the individual pockets of the archdiocese, families there are many homeschool families in your archdiocese, more than what we actually see in other dioceses around the country. Many of those, with homeschooling, they want to keep their children together. Okay, so the pre-K-12 option certainly came through loud and clear, that families are interested in kind of having that one campus, all kids, on the same campus. I mentioned the results specifically just in how many Catholic families we were able to attract to fill out the most recent survey. The classical approach that you just asked about, I struggle with that because the word classical, if I asked everyone in this room to define it, everyone in this room would have a different definition. But what came out loud and clear is that families are looking for a Catholic school that is unapologetically Catholic. Does it have to be? Absolutely. Does it have to be classical? No. What does that even mean, right? We don't have a definition for that. But they don't want a watered down approach to the Catholic Church. So back to that same question even about mass participation, your families in this area are there. They are striving for that. So there are small things that we can do in our existing Catholic schools to start to shift that perception a little bit. The problem that you're going to run into and you will never solve, you are either too Catholic or you're not Catholic enough. That's a challenge. So the biggest piece, though, is making sure, and again, also as we bring in, like I mentioned, the tax credit scholarships and we have opportunities for new families, that's a non-negotiable. Scream loud and proud to your families, we are Catholic. And you, yes, have a choice to enroll in our school, but if you choose to enroll in our school, this is what you're getting. This is what your child is getting. Laura, were there other specifics that came to mind?
You know, if you can recall, because I know you don't have the slides in front of you, but like maybe the top 4 reasons people choose a Catholic school?
Absolutely. Thank you for that. This got brought up in another conversation too. Decision-making factors. We send out thousands of surveys around the country every year. The top 3 or 4 are pretty standard. Number 1, safe and secure environment. A parent will invest in a school if they feel safe, if their child feels safe. Safe and secure environment doesn't just mean the building, the external. It also means that my child is safe in their classroom. My child is loved by their teacher. That's number 1. Number 2, caring and competent faculty and staff. You talk about being able to hire high-quality teachers, that is a must. And you have to keep them. And you have to pay them just wages. Parents will invest in a Catholic school with high-quality teachers. Number 3, usually academic excellence. There's certainly the academic component that stands out for families. Something that stood out in the most recent survey here in Oklahoma City, the trend around the country is that the Catholic piece is starting to drop. It is not as high of a priority for parents in choosing a school today as it once was. The most recent survey, though, that we did here came out number 1. Same with the presence of religious and sisters. That's impactful. Now, again, there are certain constraints and realities, right? We keep hearing, we want to see more priests, we want to see more nuns. Where do we find them? Similarly, schools, we want to see the pastor in the school more, and the pastor says, and I'd like to see you in the pews more. It's a two-way street. Okay? Other questions?
Thank you for your data. That was my question. The University of Dallas did a study a few years back that one of the driving factors for Catholic school success is the pastor's involvement. Mm-hmm. And the pastor being an integral part. In your studies, in your decision-making, do you look at the shrinking presbyterate in archdioceses? Do you look at different priest competencies and the logistics of that?
We absolutely do. The pastor plays a critical role in looking at the future of a Catholic school. And you're spot on. The success of a school, number 1 is leadership. Whether it's the pastor or the principal, poor leadership can break a school very, very quickly. But amazing leadership can do the opposite, right? So yes, those are realities that we look at. You know, in other parts of the country that we're working with pastors who, it's a struggle to run a school. You definitely weren't trained in it, right? So you move in and, you know, start your pastoral, you know, opportunities, and then you're told, and you have a school. And you go, okay. And you have all the decision-making power. That's hard. It's very hard. So yes, we have to take into account who's in that leadership role, what their capacities are. If there isn't buy-in from pastor leadership on a school, it's going to be an uphill battle. All right. Oh, one more.
I know your data spoke specifically that families wanted high academic performance. Do you have data also that is college preparatory also important, or is it just what
Sure. The question was about high academic expectations, but is there also college prep? Like, is that as high of a desire for families? When we look at high schools, most often, yes. But we're also starting to see that trickle down. That's the challenge, right? So you'll also see around the country, many high schools are expanding to include middle school programs, middle school grades. The entire Archdiocese of New Orleans shifted to that model where they're all elementary is K to 6, and then middle school, high school is 7 through 12. The high expectations of curriculum and academics from parents are continuing to come across as more and more important. So 7th through 12th grade, more so than anything, parents are choosing options where their child is pushed more rigorously, and even more so the college prep perspective that you're looking at or asking about.
Okay, one more. Along with that, is there any data that backs up having a specialized school, such as like a fine arts school, STEM school, or anything like that?
Absolutely. Yeah, so as part of those survey processes, I mentioned kind of decision-making factors. What programs are you interested is the second section of that. Something new to me, and I chuckle when you say that because similarly in Bridgeport, Connecticut, we're conducting feasibility studies for exactly that. Niche programs in the elementary schools, one with STEM stream, one with fine arts, and one with athletics. And this goes back to that message of parents want the school that is the right fit for their child, and that's difficult. So that's why the data gathering in this is so important, because we're not going to please everyone. And you want to know something? That's exactly why most of our schools suffer. Because when enrollment starts to decline, we start to try to offer everything to everyone, and then we become not really good at anything. So we need to develop that niche program that the majority of our committed families are looking for, knowing that, again, when a family comes in, it is okay to tell a family, this school may not be the right fit for your child. All right. Thank you.